So welcome to Unbroken, the safe place for male survivor podcast. Because every male survivor deserves hope, healing, support, and a BMW. And here's your male survivor, leadership coach, and hypnotherapist, Thomas Edward. All right, guys. Hey, welcome once again to Unbroken. All right, the safe place for male survivors podcast. All right, so you probably noticed, you're like, hey, that's a different introduction there. Yeah, sometimes I have to switch it up, and I'm switching it back up. You probably have heard this one before, long time ago. But here's the thing. I try to keep my stuff 100, right? So I try and keep my licenses and those different type of things for the music and, whatever sound things that I use sometimes, whatever in the background. And so even though I do have the license for the music that I play, like you guys know, I usually use the just pieces of the Eminem one. I get so much. I just mean so much from YouTube. And it's like I put in there, hey, I've got the license. Here's the license number, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And still it gets hit. So I said, you know what? I'm tired of this, right? So I'm just going to take it back to some old school intros and just use those because those are ones that I actually developed the music for intro. And then that way I won't have any problem. And then like YouTube can get off of my back. It's just, it's like, all right, whatever. So hopefully those of you blast from the past, you're like, hey, I remember that. Right. So there it is. Just change the kind of intro a little bit. But other than that, there we go. All right, guys. So how are you doing? Shout out to my UK people, those and things. And got a little surprise for you today, hopefully. Keep sending those email messages when you have questions or say, hey, can you possibly, cover this? And it's usually in my list. It's on the itinerary. Now, it might take me time to get to it, so I release these like every couple of weeks. And this one might be a little bit earlier out of the rotation, but that's okay. So far, we have been dealing with partners, but I figure, you know what, we got to mix it up a little bit also. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a different subject tonight. Don't worry, we'll still be coming back to the partner stuff because I have enough questions to cover a couple more episodes. But hopefully you are enjoying those. And if you are, feel free to, just shoot me an email and say, yo, Coach T, man, that really helped. Or, I got a feedback from one person and they said, wow, thank you for doing that. Their partner shared some things with them and they knew how to react, and it just opened up the whole relationship even more. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we want. All right. So I'm going to try and hang in here. So you guys know, pretty much everyone calls me Coach T-Bone, and you know why they call me T-Bone, because in my formative years, well, not that early, but I was walking across the street and I was hit by a car. I flew. Now, the police report says 70 feet. Okay. I don't know because I was knocked out and I was flying through the air. All I remember is simply flying through the air because it was morning, those early mornings where it's still kind of dark outside because I was catching the bus. And I just remember flying through the air, and I just remember seeing the stars. And it's like your brain moves in slow motion. That's the neuroscience. And I just remember thinking, oh, okay, this is it. Bam. And then I'm out, right? So my body flying through the air from the first car. I fly over into the lane and the car's coming from the other direction. And then that car hits me. Of course, I don't feel that one, right? Because I'm already knocked out. Now, that's what the police report says. So we'll have to take them at face value, so then they're rushing me, of course, to the hospital. And then I wake up while they're rushing me to the hospital, pain like I've never felt before. I think, well, because I'm going to say it was through my whole body. Right. So, just got all these different type of things going on. So it left me with some residual things like traumatic brain injury. I've got spine issues. And so one of the reasons, you're listening to this and I'm recording it for you, but it's early in the morning. And it's early in the morning because I can't sleep. And the reason I can't sleep because in order to help me, I get these spine injections, right, for the different pain. So pretty much they're steroids. And so we're trying to keep me from pretty much ending up in a wheelchair again. And so we're trying to treat it. So one of the things is for when I have this injection, transforaminal injection, sometimes it keeps me up and I'm a little bit, dizzy, can't go to sleep, disturbed sleep. It has all these different type of side effects. So I'm type of person I'm just like, well, you know what? Instead of sitting here or laying here actually, or trying to lay here or sit in my zero gravity chair, let me just get up and let me just actually do something because that's just kind of me. And so then it's like, okay, I'll take my mind off of that and maybe I'll take a nap sometime later today. So that's where you're getting this, right? So if I hopefully I'm not slurring my words, too much, but just know that's what's going on. All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the self sabotage loop. Now I'm going to have a couple of episodes on this. This was a question that was asked me. And so we're going to dive into it a little bit because this is something that affects survivors quite a bit. Let me give you a little bit. It's going to have more, I'm going to say a little bit more, maybe clinical, immersive, maybe grounded tone. I'll try, with the neuroscience, I'll try not to geek out on it, too much and make sure that we're kind of hopefully hitting the questions and things that, were asked. But I want you to think about this. There's a moment, I'm going to say a moment before the collapse. And that's for us as survivors. And so it doesn't look dramatic, let's say from the outside. There's no flashing loud lights. There's no shouting. Maybe there's no real, chaos going on yet, but there just seems to be a subtle shift. And so maybe it's that, tightening in the chest, or maybe it's that restlessness that's kind of in your jaw, or maybe it's a thought that just whispers, right, this just won't last. And it's at that beginning. Now, I'm going to say that's the beginning. And so self-sabotage, I'm going to say, really starts with just like total out, destruction, catastrophe. It kind of starts maybe a little bit with discomfort. Now, we don't notice, but that's kind of where it kind of starts. And if you don't understand that discomfort, then you'll probably mislabel whatever's going on or the destruction. So, like I said, recently I received a letter and someone shared that, they were kind of working with, someone, survivors, whatever, and they're in this mode, or they feel that they're in this road, and it seems like they're kind of, sabotaging. And so they were wondering, like, man, I'm having a hard time, trying to work with this person, defining what's going on. I'm trying to help this individual. They're moving down this certain path. And he started describing some of the things that he would see over and over again. So, male survivors, we're doing good, we're doing well, we're somewhat stabilizing, and you're trying to work with someone and you're trying to give them another chance, and then things just kind of implode. I call it implode, explode, right? And so when you're working with them, they just start violating whatever those conditions are. We start to relapse, and sometimes we'll even start picking fights, right? Because the sabotage is starting to take place. And so we're starting to sabotage the relationship. Maybe someone's trying to help us. And so we're throwing away all these different opportunities, relationship opportunities, job opportunities, opportunities to connect. And when we ask, well, why? And the thing is, as survivors, we just don't know. Or maybe we'll just say something like, man, I just lost control. I felt like I lost control. But maybe here's what we need to understand. And that is that most self-sabotage is really not about losing control, but it's about, and you guys know where we're going with this, right? It's about the nervous system. It's about the nervous system trying to regain control. And I run into this so much when I'm working with male survivors and we're talking about, well, why am I doing this? And why am I acting out? And it's like your nervous system is trying to gain control. For those of us that have been sexually abused, one of the things is it's like our brain is trying to go back to those moments where someone else took control of us. And even though this is today, and those things may not be happening to us, the brain is looking for some possibility, some way, some method to know that it has gained control. And that's what the nervous system does. So if you're a survivor and you're listening, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not stupid. You're not doomed. And you're not chasing chaos because you love chaos. You're not acting out because you love acting out. Now, you may be choosing it because actually it's familiar. It feels familiar. The nervous system's like, yeah, this feels familiar. And the nervous system prefers familiar because it sees familiar actually as being safe. Okay? So today we're going to just kind of walk, I'm going to say, into this a little bit carefully. We're going to I had an individual I was working with this. His name was Shamus. And so we're going to hear a little bit of Shamus. Now, Shamus he's a composite, right? So built from real stories, real disclosures, real collapses, and real actually breakthroughs. And so, but the thing is, Shamus doesn't know that he's actually sabotaging himself. And so all he knows, the only thing that he knows is that every time something good kind of begins, it's not long before it ends, and then he actually ends.
My first memory isn't the abuse. It's the silence after. The way everyone acted normal. The way I felt different. I was 8. It was a family friend. Trusted. Close. I didn't have language for it. I just knew I felt dirty. Like something had been taken. But nothing changed on the outside. So I decided nothing changed on the inside. I stopped talking about it. Stopped thinking about it. Stopped feeling about it. By 13, I had discovered something better than silence. Numbness. Weed first, then alcohol, then pills, then girls, then more girls. Sex felt powerful. It felt like control, like I was choosing what happened this time. I told myself I was just a horny teenager, but underneath that, there was this constant hum, like I was being hunted, like if I slowed down, something would catch me. As an adult, I did okay. Good at interviews, charismatic, could sell anything. But every time I got close to something stable, a relationship that felt real, a promotion that felt earned, a chance to build something, I'd mess it up, cheat, pick a fight, stop showing up, get high, take a stupid risk, and afterwards I'd say the same thing. See, this is who you are. I didn't know it was tied to when I was 8. I thought I was just broken.
And there we have Shamus's story. So what Shamus, I'm going to say at that time, what Shamus didn't know or doesn't know yet is this, is that self-sabotage is rarely random. And so what it is, it's actually patterned survival. So when we're talking about childhood sexual abuse doesn't just create memories, but it also creates rules. Now, this is one of the reasons those of you that work with me when we're doing the hypnotherapy, and you'll notice we're doing with the hypnotherapy, what we're doing is we're going in into the subconscious, and we're not only just discovering those rules, but we're giving our subconscious different ideas for different rules. And so we're breaking, remember what we call the rules, right? Which are bullshit rules. In other words, they really don't exist. They're things that we've helped to create to actually survive, but they don't really serve us well. They're actually dysfunctional. And so rules are about safety. Rules are about safety. Rules are about identity. And so rules about what happened when good things begin. There's rules that live in our nervous system. And so they're not just thoughts, right? They're part of the system. This is the funny, no, not the funny thing, but this is the interesting thing when we think about being survivors in our nervous system. Oftentimes we think that we're making, decisions, choices. And the reality is that we're not. We're actually just following rules and patterns. And a lot of those rules and patterns are actually dysfunctional because they come from what happened to us. So for Shamus, when Shamus began to feel stable, right, then, here's kind of what actually starts, happening biologically. His nervous system will scan for threats, but there's no obvious threat. Okay. So then what does the body do? The body does something remarkable. It would actually create one, right? This is where the self-sabotage is starting to come in. It's like, wait a minute. Did I really hear what my partner says? Wait a minute. It sounds like she was using an accusatory tone, right? And so the body, the mind is starting to create one. And that's because chaos feels predictable. And predictable feels controllable. Well, I know what I'm going to do. And controllable feels safer than actually waiting, we're going to say, for the pain or the surprise pain. Now, once again, this isn't weakness. It's conditioning. It's conditioning of that nervous system. We've learned these things. And that's one of the reasons oftentimes when I'm working with male survivors and they get so frustrated because as we start working through these things and going through the modules, they say, I get this intellectually. They're like, I listen to the models, I get it, I write down, and I understand it intellectually. Why isn't it working? I said, because you haven't really attached to it emotionally. We haven't touched the subconscious yet. And that's the piece that is missing, right? And so that's one of the reasons we start doing the hypnotherapy. All right, so let's talk about our CSA root. And pretty much it's going to be what the body learns. So let's kind of slow it down a little bit and break it down. So when a child is sexually abused, especially by someone that they trusted, the body learns, we're going to say, several core survival truths, okay? I'm going to think there's more than 4, but there's 4 that I can think of right now off the top of my head with this injection in me. So the first one I'm going to say is relaxation is dangerous. Okay, so that's one of the survival truths. So abuse often happens when a child feels safe, when they feel unsuspecting, right? And they're trusting. And so guess what? The body is in a state of being relaxed. You're relaxed around whatever this person or usually or normally before the event takes place or the abuse takes place, because either you trust this person, right? And so relaxation now, though, because it's been used that way, is now seen as danger. This is the survival truth. In order for us to survive, we have to realize we can't be relaxed because relaxed is danger, right? And so then we're walking around on pins and needles all the time. So many survivors, when I started working with them, they can't be like touched from behind, touched on the shoulder or anything like that because it sends them off, right? Because that survival truth says, I can't be relaxed because I don't know what's coming. The second thing I would say is that closeness leads to harm, right? So if this is someone, and this takes place, like we said, from someone we trusted, and the body's learned this survival trust, now closeness becomes the enemy, because it was through this avenue of closeness in which we were harmed. And so now the person who should protect us becomes the one who violates us. So I'm going to make sure that I don't get close to people, because when I do, there's this big possibility that I'm going to be violated. And guess what that also means? That means that I don't have control. Okay? I don't want to be out of control, right? Because someone else was controlling me, so I've got to control everything else. I'm going to say the next survival truths when we're talking about what the body learned in this whole sabotage is being seen actually equals exposure. Okay? So when this happens, we were given attention. And so before that attention would feel safe. Oftentimes when I'm working with survivors, especially if it's been a grooming process, and they'll talk about how the person, would buy them lavish gifts, they would spend time with them, they would understand what those emotional needs that they needed as a child, and they would give it to someone to talk to, someone to share problems and things so they're getting the attention. But then what happens is the abuse takes place. And so now the attention gets the opposite. Attention is unsafe because this is where the abuse took place. Okay. And then I'm going to say the fourth one, which kind of fits even in with the grooming, is that good moments are traps. Okay. So like we said, the affection, the play, they become an avenue of normalcy, right? That's what the groomer's doing. They're creating this normalcy before they're going to introduce something that isn't normal. And so all of these things actually become the precursors to betrayal. So anytime I'm around someone where things are feeling, oh, this feels a little bit normal, or is there affection going on here? Or, oh, there's play or whatever, play, banter, which acts as a social thing that helps us to grow. It becomes safe because now it feels like a precursor to, oh, this is what started to happen before the person did this to me, before the betrayal took place. So now think about, you've got all those things that have happened to this child. So now you fast forward to adulthood. And so your loving partner says, I'm proud of you. But the body hears, whoa, 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 that's attention. Okay, so now I'm exposed. Okay, so that's going right back up to the number 3. This is going to feel unsafe because this is attention. Or the boss says, man, I really see leadership potential in you. And your brain goes, what? Wait. This sounds like this is getting a little bit too close. I'm being seen a little bit too much. And so your body starts to hear, you're visible. You're being noticed. Or let's say a supervisor or a judge or whatever might say, you know what? You've earned this opportunity, right? But the body, the survival pattern rules, hears, this will be taken. Okay. So then what does the body do? Well, we got to regain control. So how are we going to regain control? How are we going to make sure that we are not seen, that we're not getting the attention, that the closeness, that we're not develop any, and that we're not going to be relaxed? Well, we start by destroying. That's how we're going to gain control. So by destroying the very thing before it can become the thing that we saw that destroyed us. And guess what that is? That's the self-sabotage loop. All right, so let's talk about the loop. We're going to say the loop itself a little bit, kind of step by step. And so I'm just going to take you into this, and hopefully this will make a little bit sense to you. Remember, I got a couple episodes on this, so feel free to ask the questions in between the podcast sessions if you have questions. So let's kind of map out Shamus's pattern. Hopefully this will help make it a little bit more clear for us. So step 1. So stability begins. right? So things start to improve, right? The calm actually starts to appear for him. The next step is that internal activation. So the restlessness, the irritability, the suspicion, a subtle kind of like, well, this won't last. The third thing I'm going to say is the identity whisper. And so the identity whisper is, well, you know what? I don't deserve this. This isn't really me, or they don't know the real me. Okay, so we're just going through this pattern that oftentimes shows up. And I'm using Shamus's because this is the composite that I see when I'm working with survivors. And then I know it's personal because I know that I've experienced this also. Step 4 becomes kind of the impulsive action. And so the impulsive action that we're doing to self-sabotage, right? Because I don't deserve this. This isn't really me. If they really knew about me, this isn't going to last, right? This is a self-sabotage pattern that's taking place. So now the impulsive action. So maybe it's drugs, right? So I start taking the drugs. Now, I feel like I'm getting control back by actually being out of control. Maybe it's sex. Remember we talked about the sex. We talked about, re-trauma and reenactment, those different type of things. Conflict. Man, why does everything have to be, a mountain with the molehill out of you? All I said was, right, or withdraw, or we are very afraid of taking risks, right? So impulsive. Step 5 is that I'm going to say the collapse. So now that we've gone through these different things, the relationships are strained, the job is lost, the trust in our partner, spouse, whatever is broken. And just like we talked about in our other cycle, we get to number 6 and now we've got the shame confirmation. See, I'm broken. Okay. And so that shame resets us back to familiar ground, which is the chaos. Okay, which is the chaos. Now, it might feel strangely calm. Now, if you're dealing with someone, like this, I'm just going to say something. And this is a little bit critical. If you have someone like this in your life, so a male survivor, and you're noticing this, and you're like, man, this is really sounding familiar. I'm noticing these patterns, right? So you can't confront people, I'm going to say, with step 4. So they're doing drugs or the sex without understanding the 1, 2, and 3. Okay, the stability begins, the internal activation, and the identity whisper, right? So you're just going and you're just confronting. You're confronting whatever the action that's going on, but you haven't taken time to really dive into the stability, which is 1, the internal activation, and whatever that identity whisper that is going on. And so if you only address the behavior, you're missing the survival logic and pattern. All right. Now I'm going to jump into a little bit more because someone asked about this. So I'm going to jump into this a little bit from an ADHD and trauma, which we're going to call this the amplifier. Okay. So this layer, this is what we're going to call the neurodiversity, especially for maybe someone in your life and you're like, wait a minute. Okay. So they've got all these things on top of this, but then they also have ADHD, which complicates things. Okay. And so it complicates this action pattern. Not because it's the ADHD that causes harm, but because it can accelerate the flip. Okay, so I'm just giving you a specific scenario here. You're like, okay, this isn't making sense for me, Coach C. That's okay, right? So this is for you, and you're trying to understand the survivor, but maybe your survivor also deals or has ADHD. Okay, I'm just throwing you just this in here for this. All right, so like we said, it's not because the ADHD causes harm, but it's because it can accelerate what we call the flip. And so the ADHD traits are interacting with the trauma. So now you got the impulsivity under emotional stress. You have heightened sensitivity to rejection. You've got your dopamine seeking for stimulation. We talked about that in some earlier podcasts. I think you can actually go back and find it there on the website about the dopamine. We have a difficulty actually delaying relief. That's why it seems like we're so impulsive, or we are impulsive because we're having problems actually delaying the relief. Emotional intensity then spikes. Okay. So when trauma activates the nervous system, what happens is the ADHD can reduce what we call the pause between the urge and the action. So instead of activation, then the thought, then regulation, then decision, it becomes activated, bam, action. That's it. Activation, straight to action. And then later we've got the regret, then we've got the confusion, then we've got the shame. Now, I say this because this is just ADHD people also. It can also just be us in general, male survivors, because I know it's the same pattern, right? And so then what happens is it deepens that identity loop that we talked about. Oh, no, because here comes the shame. Oh, that's just who I am, right? And so I remember when I was working with Shamus, because this is Shamus' story. So Shamus, he isn't just dealing with trauma. He's dealing with a nervous system that really moves fast, also because of his ADHD. And then the shame moves faster also. So as soon as he activates and he does the action, whatever it is, drug, sex, whatever, bam, it just runs right into the identity loop. And then he becomes really depressed. Okay. But he isn't just dealing with the trauma. He's dealing with the combination of the two. It's just now it's moving faster. Okay. So what you might be seeing, I'm going to say in the room as you're sitting across from this man who has, we're going to say, lost control. So here's what might actually be happening internally. So he's not thinking, you know what, I just want to ruin this. I want to sabotage this, whatever it is, right? Relationship, job, whatever, family connection. But he might be feeling, as we go back to those steps, he might be feeling overexposed. He actually might be feeling unsafe in success. I'm being success, but success is actually drawing attention, right? And so, we don't want that. Or maybe they're afraid of being found out. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe that's what they're feeling, or, afraid of being known. Or like we said, just being suspicious of stability. And so he may not have the language for any of it. All he knows is that these things are happening. And if he does have the ability to step back, he's like, wow, I'm self-sabotaging, or I notice I keep self-sabotaging. And you're really knowing that he's self-sabotaging, right? Because you're part of the person who's helping, who's concerned about him. And so the male survivor might even say, well, you know what? I don't know. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I keep saying that. I don't know why I keep sabotaging this. And he's probably telling the truth because, like we said, the body moved before the mind could actually catch up. All right. So here's a kind of a reflection, I'm going to say, cue for us to think about. If you're listening as a survivor, I want you to think about this question. When in your life do you most often sabotage? Okay, when in your life do you most often sabotage? So do you notice that you sabotage maybe after receiving praise? Do you notice that maybe you sabotage before intimacy? Now remember, there's different types of intimacy, right? There's emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, social intimacy, mental intimacy. But do you notice that you sabotage most often before that? Or maybe you most often sabotage when expectations increase. Someone's going to be expecting something of you, right? And if you go through and you success, that's going to bring more attention. And that means that you've lost control. Or do you most often sabotage when things are calm? Okay. So after this, hearing this question, reflecting, the first thing I'm going to ask you, what does your body feel right now? Does it feel tight? Does it feel buzzing? Does it feel numb? Does it feel angry? And then where do you feel it? Maybe like, man, Coach T, am I tight? I heard that and I start thinking about what you said and my chest just start feeling really tight. Or, wow, I went numb. It was like my feet went numb. Or man, there's buzzing or tingling, whatever, down my right side, or my eye started twitching, whatever. And it's really important, right? Sensations do matter. And it's really important for us, I'm going to say, to acknowledge them. And so the neuroscience, like we said, pretty much is just familiarity, right, over what we call safe. And so the brain's job is prediction. Okay, the brain's job is prediction. That's why your brain is always looking for patterns. I always give this example when I'm doing leadership classes for executive leaderships, and we're talking about understanding people. And so our brain, and I'll put a little thing up on the board, and I'll just talk, and I was like, okay, so this person has this look, and you've seen this look. And every time you see this look on people or individuals that you work with, it means trouble with a capital T. You're just, So your brain gets used to that pattern. So now somebody's coming into your office maybe for their one-on-one, and they've got the look. And so your brain's like, oh no, they've got the look, and it creates this whole scenario on what's the look. And so you say to the person, okay, look, we don't want to waste time here. Okay, I've seen that look before. What's going on? Right? And so you've created this whole scenario, and they're looking at you, and then they say, oh, I'm sorry, man, dude, I've got gas today. Okay, you've created this whole scenario, this whole picture, how you're going to talk to them, how you're going to deal with them from this look, because the brain's job is to do prediction, right? To put all these patterns and things together. It's like, because we ain't got time, right? Right? We got to figure out. So if chaos was normal for us in childhood, then chaos actually becomes the baseline. Okay. I want you to picture that in your head on a piece of paper, the baseline, right? So if trauma was normal, you got that picture of that little stick figure child through there who's up and down with all these things that are going on, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, abandonment, and rejection, all these different types. That becomes our normal baseline. That's the chaos that becomes the normal baseline. And so guess what? The nervous system will return to the baseline, even if the baseline is destructive, because that's homeostasis, right? That's where everything heals and evens out, right? And so the body calibrates to know what it knows, okay? And so if you grow up in the volatility, peace actually now feels like a trap. If you grow up in secrecy, hey, don't tell anybody what happened. Don't tell anybody what we did, right? Well, being known now as an adult feels dangerous. If we grew up in betrayal, this person has done these things to us, whatever, behind the scene, then closest now feels like exposure. And so sabotage just actually becomes regulation. I know it's like, wow, that's twisted. Yeah, that's twisted. That's dysfunctional. And that's costly. But it's regulatory. This is when we talk about the emotional regulation, emotional deregulation, right? It becomes the norm. The chaos becomes the standard. All right. I'm going to call this part one. So we'll kind of close this one out and we'll do another one next time. So let's just close this with just talking about, I'm going to say, the realization. So Shamus, he didn't know this yet, right? He still thought that he was broken. But soon through the coaching, when we started to help him to see that, you know what, this is a pattern. This is a survival pattern, neuroscience pattern, right? Then he starts, he says something, starts to say things that I thought were powerful and impactful. It's like, well, you know, I thought I was afraid of failing, but it really wasn't about failing. He's like, I'm actually afraid of succeeding, because succeeding is where the exposure comes in, the attention, whatever is drawn to me. And he says, like, that realization changes everything, right? So once the loop can be seen, then the loop can actually be interpreted. That's the cool thing, right? And that's the reason I love doing what I'm doing, because it takes a time, right? And that's why our programs are built like you got 9 months, 12 months, then 18, you decide which one you want to go into. And it's so funny because often the guys that come in, they'll do the 9 months. And they're like, yeah, we're going to go through, we're going to whip it through. And then they get to a point and they're like, whoa. And they start realizing there's a little bit more here than I thought. And they just move over to the 12-month program, which is great, right? But that's where they start seeing them like, wait a minute, I'm starting to see the loop is starting to be interpreted. Oh, and then we go back and they start looking at the different, oh, okay, now that makes sense why I reacted, whatever, that way, right? That's why I love what I do. And I love the guys that come in here and they're ready to really do the work, because then those that have that motivation, it just accelerates everything. And now they're not sitting here. They come to me and they've been like, oh, Coach T, I've been doing therapy like 5 years, 7 years. And we get in and with a couple of months, they're like, whoa, this is a lot. Yeah. And it's impactful because we're not just giving you the answers. I remember I had my teacher, and as I was studying with him, I can't remember what discipline it was, and he says, you have to realize that in a Western society, he was Eastern, he says in a Western society, the thinking is, when you think about this whole idea of truth, you just want someone to give you the answer. But he says, in that venue, in that space, truth is not powerful and it doesn't have any impact. He says, however, when you help people and you start asking them the questions and showing them different things, and then out of that they discover the truth, their truth, then it becomes so much life impacting. And I just have to say that teacher was correct. Those are the same things that I've noticed. All right, guys, so we'll just call that part one of the whole sabotaging loop. So we'll pick up next time and we'll talk a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit how in this loop, when the shame then becomes the identity. And we'll talk about a little bit more from the the self-sabotaging, when it becomes, I'm going to say, that self-fulfilling prophecy mechanism, right? That's kind of we're going to say the next step. All right, guys, I hope that this, was helpful for you, especially the one who asked the question. There's a lot. I'm just going to tell you there's a lot. Now, even this, I'm trying to cut down. I'm like, okay, I know everyone can't hang with this. I'm like, I could do 8 sessions on this, just like with the partner stuff. But yeah, the reality is when we look at the neuroscience, there's something about novelty that the brain also likes. And if you stay on one subject too much, the brain's like, look, I ain't got time for this. And it just moves on. So I don't want to do that, because I want to make sure that you actually, get the information, because that's really important to me. And so hopefully that during these reflection cues and things, that your brain is starting to discover some of these little nuggets or pieces or bits, whatever, of truth that are making it more impactful for you. And then I also hope that, through this, you're like, wow, you know what? maybe the Break My Abuse program is something that I really want to do. Yeah. And I hope that it is something that you want to do. It just creates, I don't know, I've had some of the best relationships coming off just working with guys. And I'm even just trying to build stuff where we get together like once, maybe a year, and we just kind of talk about our progress, where we're at, those that are up for that and want to do that, right? So it has to be a desire. All right, guys, until our next podcast, remember to be safe.